Hello, everyone. I'm absolutely delighted to open the fifth season of Rebellious Research Seminar Series. And I couldn't be happier to have Chris Nunn here with us today with his film I'm a big fan of, I have to say. So no pressure at all, Chris. Uh, and it's a really lovely to have you here today, and you'll be talking to us about filmmaking as research. So we have about an hour for Chris's talk, and then the last half an hour we're gonna do a bit of Q&A. So the room is yours, Chris.
Fabulous. Thanks so much. I'm not quite sure it's going to last an hour actually, but I do have a habit of talking. So let's just see where we get to. Thanks so much for joining us, everyone. I'm just going to start my slides and then get that going. So hold on a second. Good. So Agatha, you should be able to see that.
It is beautiful. It's on our
Lovely.
screens.
Great. On beautiful University of branded slides, University of Birmingham branded slides as well. So great. Thank you so much for having me. I realized as I'd written the abstract for this that the title was really shit. So I've sort of retitled it. So universities as the new indies. I think that's a bit sexy, really. And possibly speaks frankly more to what we're doing. And I realized I'd used the fairly generic practice as research instead of creative practice as research. And of course, what we're talking about here is feature filmmaking. So yeah, what I want to talk about is sort of generally feature film productions in universities. Really important to say that while I'm going to talk about two specific projects that have come out of the University of Birmingham here in the last 3 years, we are by no means the only group of academics to sort of move into this area. I think there's quite a long history of it. So I've highlighted just a few examples and institutions that I'm aware of. Many of them, Agatha, have spoken here before. So, it's not, so there's quite a lot of confluence around that. And I think it's important, really, I suppose, as we're galvanizing perhaps around this idea that universities can be a home for high-level, high-quality feature film co-productions, probably an important qualifier there, that actually we start to acknowledge each other and all the work that's going on in all these places. I think the more institutions point to other institutions, it tends to get them excited. Xavier from Birmingham City University told me he managed to get £10,000 extra money for his documentary because he pointed to the one we were producing here. So I think, if it's, the more we can sort of big each other up, the more our institutions go, well, if that's happening there, then we've got to obviously be seen to do something similar here. So I'll highlight just a few that I'm aware of. It is not an extensive or expansive or a complete list. Then I'll talk about the two films that we produced here at the University of Birmingham. One is the documentary Children of the Wicker Man, currently still doing a few select festival screenings, actually, including a Halloween screening this Friday at the David Lean Cinema in London, in Croydon. Well, Croydon, if Croydon is London, there's probably a debate about that. But in Croydon, the David Lean Cinema is hosting us, and that's also acting as a sort of public book launch for the book that has recently come out to accompany the documentary. So if any of you are free on Halloween, obviously I'm sure by now you have many exciting plans, but if you don't, then pop on down to Croydon and we'll have some fun. And more recently this year, we produced a fiction feature film and folk horror, partially inspired by a film that Robin Hardy, the director of The Wicker Man, was trying to make when he died. That is currently called An Ill Wind, though possibly, sort of watch this space because we may well be changing that within the next 48 hours before it goes to the American film market. So definite tentative title, and that's already changed about 6 times. So even as the producer on that, I am struggling to keep up. And then some final reflections, I think, on creating a space for universities as new independent film producers. I think that's really the headline, and the sort of minutiae and how these projects got made, I think is present decent case studies in how it's possible to get this stuff done. But I don't believe, again, for a second, that that means they're exclusive or that this model necessarily works perfectly, because it absolutely doesn't. But these are, I guess, beginnings of perhaps a wider conversation that practice-based academics can have about producing high-quality film work and getting their institutions on board and behind that work, which again I think is a slightly separate issue, but we always need as much support as we can get. So yeah, a couple of examples here that I'm very well aware of. Obviously, Neil Fox is the leader of the Sound Image Cinema Lab down at Falmouth. We know that they produced or co-produced lots of Mark Jenkins' work, and there's a few other examples here. The Severed Son actually had its American premiere alongside our documentary at Fantastic Fest in Texas. So we got to meet Dean, who is one of their lecturers as well, and directed this film. And I got to meet the producers as well, and hear a little bit about that story. So I think the work they're doing there is really pioneering and great to see. I know that Eric has featured on your seminar series before as well, Agatha, and obviously he was a sort of quite a prolific feature filmmaker. Still is, I think. It's probably never going to stop. And to be honest, I'm quite sure it was your seminar where Eric said, because I'm sure I couldn't attend, I'm sure Lee James sent me the link, and he said something like, "You've made a feature film, so what?" And that's actually been absolutely stuck in my head as I've been trying to sort of even put this talk together, because you go, yeah, okay, if it's about impact and engagement, then yeah, so what? And I wonder, again, open to the room really, if whether or not by the end of this I've got an answer that satisfies the so what, but let's leave that as an open question. And an article got published about the work we were doing at Birmingham, and I got contacted by another producer, later professor, who highlighted work at both Edgehill and Staffordshire in co-producing feature films. I don't know much about it, but these films were the things I was able to find out about based on that email. So thank you to Roger Shannon for giving me that information, as well as a lovely email saying, great to see you doing this work. So that was nice as well. But so again, I think there's lots of it out there. I think if you looked at all four of these, the way that they're being carved up, the way they're being financed, and the way they're being produced, they're all completely different, really. When we were shooting our Shetland film earlier this year, which was micro budget to say the least, we were reflecting on a talk that we'd seen Mark Jenkins do, and Neil and Kingsley had hosted him and done this Q&A. And really, there was something quite encouraging, around the formality of the whole thing. It was a sort of proper industry production, and Falmouth is just sort of at the side. And really, an ill wind, and our experience of doing that was the university's leading. It's us, it's some of our students, it's some recent graduates, it's people who haven't done it before. That just automatically puts you in a slightly more stressful situation where you're going, okay. And of course, we did find our way through, and we've produced a film with of a remarkable quality given the context of the production. But you did feel that. So I think that more formalized. We know we've got some BFI money behind us. We know we've definitely got super experienced people, sort of at the very least in the background. And I think, again, they're more foregrounded here. And the university is a proper co-producer in that sense, I think is something I was a little bit envious of at some point. But there are also huge potentials in a method that might be described as more running and gunning. I mean, that is the essence of sort of student filmmaking and more radical filmmaking throughout the history of the medium, I say. So, maybe we do need to run and gun just a little bit more. So yeah, I do think, and I think the Edgehill one, as far as I was able to anything I could find out about it, it was very much about students sort of working on the film, there was definitely some money that went into this entity of 21 Media, and it was definitely associated with the university. But again, I suppose one of our attempts in the work we've been doing here is to make sure that students feel they have agency in the roles that they're doing. And absolutely on our Shetland film, I feel like our 5 or 6 MA students saved the day, quite regularly, were some of the best people that we had around us. And I remain very grateful to them for that. And I think the experience was good for them too, because they were able to get properly involved. And I suppose that's where the line between a more sort of formalized, this is your contract, this is your role, don't move out of this area, and the more sort of running and gunning, well, actually, we need some help. It's quick, get this tray of macaroni cheese, get it in your car, and drive to this location. Let's get stuck in, whatever it is. Let's do it. So yeah, I think that's one of the things that was an observation of mine looking at all these case studies is there's lots of them, but the details of how these things are made, how they're produced, and the role of the university's lecturers and students in all of that, I think changes on an almost case by case basis. So yes, here is Children of the Wicker Man, and our synopsis here. It was initially conceived as a sort of 50 years on from the Wicker Man. Why are people still talking about the Wicker Man? And I think one of the reasons that this documentary ended up resonating, you can see here a lovely poster with a load of laurels on it, which I'm just taking the piss now, just chucking them on, just, let's go pretty maximalist on this. But one of the reasons that I think it resonated is that it was able to tell a very personal story, which came from the archive and the documents that we found. And when we approached some more commercial partners, which we absolutely did, and I think I've got them on another slide, so I'm going slightly out of order here. But we spoke to Studio Canal, who own the rights to the Wicker Man. We spoke to the BBC, and we spoke to the BFI, all of whom expressed an interest in co-producing the film and coming in with really money. But nevertheless, that would have been extraordinarily helpful. But you sort of realized in those discussions, which eventually came to nothing on all 3 counts, that those commercial partners would have wanted a very different film. Ironically, all 3 of those commercial partners would have wanted even a different version. I think Studio Canal needed a new making of The Wicker Man, something that didn't touch on its director, and perhaps, again, for those of you who've seen Children of the Wicker Man, it doesn't really paint Robin Hardy in the best light. I think I'm being quite subtle there. Actually, it's quite critical. And if you look at reviews for the film and why I think it's been programmed, it's because it's been able to be quite bold in that storytelling. And certainly Studio Canal, I don't think were, and maybe even still now are, particularly happy with that narrative and that angle. But as academics, the 2 sons, both Justin and Dominic, are trained historians who are both working at different universities as well. So it was a truth to material, but I think one can see that the commercial side of that is a different thing. We think the BBC were very interested in the relationship between Robin Hardy and his writing partner, Anthony Shaffer. They ran an advertising business in the 1960s that was very, very successful. And I think that was the BBC angle. Let's do the 70s. Let's do this type of filmmaking. And really, again, the BFI, I think, wanted to cement the Wicker Man's place in British film history. And again, for those of you who've seen our film, I'll play a trailer in just a second, but for those of you who've seen our film, it really doesn't quite do any of those things, any of the things that the commercial partners would have necessarily wanted from it. And so I think maintaining an element of independence in terms of what we were able to do editorially was kind of vital for keeping the film on track. And as you can see, maybe from the synopsis here, hopefully, that we really did focus on Justin and Dominic as half brothers who didn't really know their dad perhaps particularly well, or certainly didn't have an easy relationship with him. And then as the producer on that, my instinct kept coming back to, well, it's sort of sons and fathers and sons and fathers, and everyone's got a dad, and certainly my relationship with my dad isn't the easiest thing. So I think, you know, let's keep coming back to that, and that is the emotional center of the film. And I think that type of, you know, possibly my take is that the university environment allowed for that investigation, allowed for the space to think about what this archive really meant, and the fact that the archive went way beyond letters from Christopher Lee, which, you know, are incredible little testaments to film history and how the Wicker Man was made. You know, I guess maybe more interesting is the scribbled note from Michael York saying, "No, I'm not going to play Sergeant Howie in the film." You know, this is good stuff for film geeks, and it is a slightly new story on how the film was made. But I don't think it resonates anywhere near as much as the difficulty of children, grieving children really, and coming to terms with the difficulties of their parents. So I believe quite firmly that the university environment and the approach of three academics saying, how are we going to make this film, as well as our editor Ella Wright. I've got a little clip of Ella talking about her editing approach as well. You know, I think was all part of that. I will show the trailer. I think we tested the sound earlier, so hopefully this works. There's my little the people who didn't come aboard. But I'll play this just for a bit of context so people can see it. Hopefully you can hear it okay, but let me know if there are any issues.
Our dad had directed a film called The Wicker Man. But to me, it was always the film that got my family.
This is the letter we got, 2021. I have in my possession a very large quantity of personal papers, which I believe were originally belonging to Robin Hardy.
Robin Hardy.
Robin Hardy. Robin Hardy.
Mr. Robin Hardy, who is the creator of The Wicker Man.
He just didn't understand how films were made.
By the time I arrived on location, there was some drama.
Anarchy was in the air, and nobody really knew what they were doing.
Yeah, Robin.
How come he never made any money from this film? How come he got cut out? What deal did he sign?
Was clearly going bankrupt throughout this whole process.
Robin Hardy abandons his family, abandons his house. Just one day he's gone.
This film had been responsible for so much damage. I don't frankly know if I can carry on with this. It's dredging off too much bad juju.
Somehow or other, though, we've been brought together to do this by this film.
Do you think that making a film about one's father is a stupid thing to do?
Stupid, no. Challenging, yes.
Great. So I'd love to say in all good cinemas, but it's just not true. No, it'll be in the David Lean Cinema in Croydon on Friday. But beyond that, we don't quite know where just yet, which is nice. You know, here's a fabulous festival run. I think that's been really wonderful for us to see the film do that. Formal distribution. Again, did we make the most commercial film we could have made? I don't think we did. And so, you know, understandably, we do have a deal that's just been signed for the US, so it is going somewhere. But it is again, it's possibly a harder sell, which I think is fascinating in its own right. So just to explain how the film kind of came about, I've already said that obviously we were in discussions with bigger players who could have come in and certainly made my life easier at various points. They didn't. So we carried on. Other universities were involved, so UCL, which is where Justin is based, University of Quebec and Montreal, which is where Dominic is based, and the University of Malta, because that is the last place that Robin Hardy ever gave a talk and a screening of The Wicker Man. So again, lots of in-kind contributions there, some more direct costs around travel and accommodation. I think with documentaries, they tend to be your major costs. We've got to get somewhere, got to stay somewhere to do this shooting. Justin, had worked in television for a very long time and had a very established production company. It hadn't done too much recently, so but I think it was really important for so many reasons that there was an established production company that had, an accountant, an accounts, and relationship with insurers. Again, a lot of sort of boring producerial stuff, but I think it really helped that we were able to plug in partially to an existing entity and run the film through that. Not that it's necessarily any faster than trying to run things through a university, but it's nevertheless there it is. We had some private equity, we had a Kickstarter campaign, and we got some AHRC impact acceleration money. That was initially 5K to get some of the film shot, and we made the case, an urgency case, around the idea that we kind of wanted to hit the film's 50th anniversary, and that was quite a unique opportunity to become part of the discussion. I maintain that that is true, even though we missed the 50th anniversary by about a year. We still got there. And also then the next 10,000 was actually to help us take the film places. So we were able to pay for film festival submissions and a film festival strategist, and then travel to some of those events. Again, all with the idea of potentially building this into an impact case study. I think the discussions I'm having around that, for any of you who are here, and again, it comes back to Eric's comment that he made on this same thing, you've made a feature film, so what? And I think once you get into the language of ref, then there are lots of claims that I think we can make and probably would make. But at a university, a more traditional research university like Birmingham, are they as interested in the film as they are in more traditional scholarship? I think that remains to be seen. Alongside other bizarre things, like maybe we're all going to be going into a unit of assessment with English, in which case you'd say, well, I don't really know quite how to articulate that. I'd rather that someone on this call or someone from our discipline was evaluating whether or not we'd made a difference in the world. But so I think knowing, the only thing I can say about REF is I know that now they want kind of environment statements around impact and engagement, and I actually think maybe instead of all of us going, can I make this into a formal case study, use refable language, package it that way. I think this is work that travels, our particular film has, but I think our work does engage and does a huge job in putting universities on the map in one way or another, and that we should take some pride in that, and that if they have to write an environment statement about what sort of work is going on, then we absolutely would feature as part of that, even if we didn't feature formally as this is a ref style written up impact case study. So there you go. My thoughts on that. You can tell I'm not actually invited to many of these forums to discuss. I'll discuss it with all of you, but no one here. I think also really positive in terms of education. We were able to use a sort of internal research interns scheme, and we had 5 students do that. We also had several former students, both from Birmingham, but also from University of Greenwich, where I used to work, who came and worked on the film at different points. I mean, it's a documentary, so a bit of a shoot here, a bit of a shoot there. Some research and archive work that really helped to get the film into a sort of, legal shape, shall I say, and I think it was a great experience for the students, and it's great to see that they're getting their first sort of feature credits from that, from this sort of home-baked production, less formal. The BFI isn't here. So I think really good still that we were able to provide that, and huge that our one of our PhD students, who will be familiar to many of you on this call, Ella Wright, edited this as her first feature film. And I think, again, for those of you that have seen it, Ella's editing is the real reason that this film, I think, has been so successful. So I think not just to credit her and say it's great that Ella was able to be a part of it. But I think really, really strong to see them come into their own and put the film together. This was described and has been described in many of the reviews as a sort of therapy film. And I really strongly believe that Ella found the therapy film. And the University of Birmingham has produced a lovely internal video. It's now actually available on our website about this process. And there's a lovely section of Ella in it. So I'm going to try and play that so you get to hear Ella. Oh, it's got everything. It's got corporate music at the works. It's fantastic. Here's Ella talking about editing the film.
I did both my undergraduate and my master's degrees here at Birmingham. I learned editing here at university. I learned how to tell stories through film here. And I work as digital and media technician here in the film department. I was really excited to be approached in the first instance to join the project. I'd only edited shorts before and sort of commercial projects, so the chance to do a feature film was really exciting. Initially, the quirkiness of my edit was really strong. You know, zippy choices, zippy sound effects, fast-paced music. We've got these photographs, we've got these papers. How would one look at them if it was a family history in a scrapbook, a photo album? So that's where that aesthetic kind of came from. But as the story progressed and the emotions got stronger, that really did have to take a backseat and kind of let the voices of those two brothers come through. As an editor, you're sort of making some executive choices in what you say and what you leave out of a story. And I really didn't want to sort of hurt their feelings. You know, they're real people. These are real emotions that are happening. Justin says in the film, you know, we're real brothers. This is real life, or something along those lines. So, yeah, I had to sort of tread very carefully in how I crafted their story. There was a lot of responsibility, but I think it worked out for the best.
Yeah, so sort of constant negotiation, I think, around, you know, Justin and Domi as the brothers telling their personal story. It's their family, it's their trauma to an extent that is being showcased and put on film. Ella as the editor, and me stuck somewhere in between it all as a producer, you know, sort of going, well, what do you know, is this the right approach? Are we finding the film here? And definitely that was a process that came out of of the actual making of the thing. You know, it wasn't until we got really stuck into the edit that sort of the therapy film emerged. And I think, as I said, there is a more corporate version. There is a sort of new making of The Wicker Man, and a film that tells the story of why The Wicker Man still holds appeal 50 years later. That was originally called Wickermania, and we haven't made that film. We do have at least half of it. Again, some of you might work with fabulous academics that we interviewed for that film, none of whom appear in Children of the Wicker Man. So we really did step away from the 50th anniversary reappraisal and come instead to this personal story. And I think that's resonated quite well. We have a series of awards from the festivals that we've been to, which again is nice. Best Practice Research Award at BAFTS, I think, was a really nice thing to receive and be respected by peers. We do have an accompanying book that was released last Thursday, so Children of the Wicker Man, in all good bookstores except any that I've been into, so maybe you do need to get it online, I don't know. Authored by Justin Dominic and edited by me. And the film has secured US distribution for both Blu-ray and cinematic release from May 2026. So it will go somewhere. We're definitely still looking for UK distribution, because frankly, this is the sort of audience where it makes the most sense. It's an iconic British horror film. So I'm hoping that does turn up for this eventually. Good, and I'll pivot now to our second feature film, which was shot in April of this year, and I think we'll get a festival premiere sometime next year. Currently titled An Ill Wind. There's the blurb up there that you can have a look at, but it's it's a woman returning to a remote Scottish island, very Wicker man, where to bury her dead husband, who is from the island. And when she arrives, the islanders are quite suspicious of her. They're suspicious of the circumstances of the husband's death, and surely enough, young girls start to go missing. And in order to solve the mystery of these missing children, our protagonist Anna has to confront her own dark family secrets. It was inspired by a film that Robin Hardy was trying to make when he was in his 80s. So you must give credit where credit's due. And only on our first recce did we meet someone who said, "Oh yes, Robin Hardy did actually get up here." Robin Hardy was taken. So he wanted to do a film called Wrath of the Gods, and I believe it revolved around a Viking-themed theme park that the gods would take sort of umbrage at the existence of said theme park, and then enact their wrath upon everyone. It would have cost, I think, probably about $500 million or something insane to make. And of course, you would have had to convince the 80 residents on Fula, one of the most remote islands and inhabited places in the whole of the UK, that they really want a Viking-themed theme park. So for some reason, for various reasons, not just his age, I don't think that film was going to come to fruition. For a while, our film was called Wrath of the Gods, and it may well, we're still in discussions about whether to revert, because, I mean, I think to talk of methodology again and to think about the way we approach this film, nothing could have been more different, I don't think, than Robin Hardy sort of arriving in Shetland, being flown around the remote islands and sort of falling asleep and say, well, I want to build my theme park. And I just don't think, we arrived and the first place we went and the first person we met was one of the archivists at the museum, who was an expert in Shetland folklore. And Justin had written a sort of draft treatment at this point that incorporated some mythology. And then straight away, the discussion was, actually, we don't really, that myth isn't something that we really talk about here. Here are some of the sort of mythological and folklore aspects that you want to bring in. And then the historians in us again, and the archivists in us, were awoken to this idea that you don't really want to go to a place and say, sort of say, this is what we're doing, when actually there is so much rich material to explore that is from a place that many people don't know much about. And that included, in the end, Shetland dialect, which features quite prominently in the film. A lot of our actors, in the end, are street cast, so with very little experience, apart from in local theatre productions and pantomime, which meant they were extremely fun to work with. But they, so Shetland dialect came through. We worked with dialect experts to sort of bring that in. You'll note that it is set on a fictional island, and therefore is a sort of anthropology, like the Wicker Man, of a fake Scottish island. And we did that because the film has these themes of sort of sexual abuse of young women, and we didn't feel particularly comfortable about saying, visit Shetland. This is set in Shetland. Oh, and by the way, having said that, of course, the BBC has managed to spin 8 seasons out of a murder mystery series out of Shetland, despite the fact it's one of the safest places in the UK. So, I mean, go figure, really. And again, actually, I suppose Shetland was something that we were looking at, partly to make sure that we didn't do the same thing, which is, most of Shetland is shot in Glasgow. There's only one actor who appears regularly who is from Shetland. And we just felt really strongly that actually this had to be a film that, while it's us coming in, and there are problems and complications around that, nevertheless, we have to do whatever we can to bring local people along for this, and to make this a film that is from the Shetlands, if not certainly about the Shetlands. So again, I'll talk a little bit about the funding structure. There were lots of funds that we applied for that we didn't get to look at various aspects. So UCL again contributed kit and resource, some travel, some accommodation. And in the end, one of their academics in creative writing ended up being a character in the film. So there you go. So they contributed an actor. Not sure anyone thought they were going to do that, but there we go. It was co-produced again by Hardy Pictures, and really more important, I think, on the fiction to have an established production company, even if it's not been making a lot recently, but to have that architecture around you, I thought was, as a producer, I thought was incredibly helpful. We got internal Birmingham funding for quality research, which focused entirely and was used almost entirely to pay our Shetland collaborators for their time and for their expertise. It also had pockets of money to bring up people to shoot behind the scenes and other things. Private equity investment, again, quite a big sum. And everyone in the UK who's making a small film, their friend is, of course, the BFI independent film tax credit, if you can ever get a reply from your accountant, which I can't. But nevertheless, I talked about established industry, didn't I? Yeah, and it turns out I think the BFI are actually clamping down on any accountants who aren't certified to do the independent film tax credit. So I think it's going to become more difficult for independent, smaller accountants to do it. But I definitely, we're using a big, famous film production accounting firm. And of course, we are small fry for them. So it's quite difficult to get any kind of response. Anyway, I'm hoping some money comes back from that eventually. And actually, if you think about the scale at which we're operating here, that you know, broadly speaking, the headline figure is 40% back on 80% of production spend. It's huge. It makes such a difference at this budget level. You know, I know the cap on that is 12 million, and in my head, if you've got 12 million, I don't really know why you need the tax credit, but apparently it's because Tom Cruise keeps lobbying the Treasury or something. I've got a friend who does all the mission films with him, so you know, so that's partly where that cap might be coming from. Again, to talk about education. You know, we had 5 of our MA students work on the film. This is indeed 5 of them and me in Shetland. And it was their formal placement, which we offer on the MA Film and Television Research and Production here. We also had 4 alumni from the University of Greenwich, which is where we were before. Again, some of them getting their first feature film credits and stepping up. You know, possibly they've been doing... So our sound guy had done a lot of shorts, was extraordinarily professional, but this was the first feature. Similarly with our second camera, similarly with our assistant director stepping up, and I think that was a really lovely experience as well. Absolutely key, I think on the next slide here, but absolutely key was Eve Christie, who was a student of ours in London at Greenwich, but actually was from Shetland. So Eve was just sort of the connective tissue to ways in which we might be able to get the film done. The behind the scenes was filmed by a current Birmingham PhD student, and in their lovely campaign that Birmingham have just launched about studying film at Birmingham, there's a video here of Georgia talking about her experience working on the Shetland film. So I'll show that. In lieu of having a trailer for the Shetland film, I don't. Right, hold on. Let's make sure we've got this. Right, hopefully you can all hear her. Here's Georgia.
Hi, my name is Georgia. I'm a master's student at the University of Birmingham, studying film and television, research and production. Come with me for a day in my life working on a film set in the Shetland Islands. So this is the room where we keep all of our equipment, all of our cameras, sound, lighting, set, makeup and hair as well. And today I started my day having some breakfast and then heading straight into the production office where I got working on some call sheets. I normally do some scheduling as well as risk assessments. I oversee the sustainability of the film and help with just general organisation of the shoot. And now today was actually really exciting because we were filming some boat scenes and I got to have a go on the safety boat. There's our sound guy, Owen, and my lecturer, Chris, as well, who's a producer on this film. And these were some really fun scenes to film. And then we get back to our old accommodation, which is really close to the location that we were filming on. And this is just for some lunch. Normally at this point, I'd be heading back to the production office, but instead today I got a really exciting opportunity to be an extra in the film. So here I am in my first costume for the first scene we were filming. It was part of a search party. And then here's me and the 3 other extras that I was working with on this scene. And then here are some of the other master's students that have come with me to Shetland to work on this film. And then the next scene that we filmed was a bigger search party scene where we were walking up and down this valley, checking mill houses and under rocks, which is really exciting. Before we wrapped for dinner and we got to wind down a bit before doing a wine run. And we get back to our accommodation just to wind down before our next day on the shoot.
Right. She definitely didn't smash a load of different days into one very digestible video. Who would think of doing something like that? Yeah, so that again gives you a sense, because again, you know, I've mentioned impact and engagement, but I think also at the heart of both of these films in very different ways we're educators, and we have fabulous students who want some experience, and we can give them that opportunity. I think I mentioned how absolutely essential our MA students were to the making of An Ill Wind in Shetland. They really were key contributors, and I think it was great to have them as part of that. Great experience for them. 2 of them and 1 University of Birmingham alumni who was on the shoot have all walked into further jobs because they were able to speak about their Shetland experience. So I think there's some real positivity that's come out of that as well. So I'll talk at the end when I'm sort of summing up some of my thoughts. But you know, these film projects can be expressed in such a variety of ways, you know, because of the unique position that we hold as academics who are producing film work. We want to talk about them as education, we can absolutely do that. Impact and engagement, we can absolutely do that. Research outputs and traditional scholarship, they are absolutely that as well. And I think, again, that really is where institutions getting behind these makes a lot of sense, because they can be quite malleable to whatever story the institution feels it needs to tell about its filmmakers and its film departments at a particular time. As rep approaches, that might change, but you know, that's there nevertheless. And I'm pleased to say that we're co-authoring an article about some of the you know, our students who do a placement are write an essay about their experiences on placement, and I was taken by some of the sort of very small things that students picked up on as their first sort of professional experience on a film set. From power dynamics to hierarchies to terms that were regularly used and thrown about without much explanation. So we're co-authoring an article, all the students who were there and me and the other producer, Alison, for the Film Education Journal, which will come out in 2026. I think that'll be fascinating as well. Keen that it's co-authored as well. I hope that'll work out. I think it'll make it more difficult, but I think more interesting, really, to get their voices heard as opposed to interviewing them and allowing me to edit. I think it's a slightly different thing. Not quite worked out how I'm doing that yet, but we'll get there. And as I mentioned before, a really strong collaborative piece. You know, I think we really, as a production team, a very small production team initially, with just, you know, director, 2 producers, and an assistant producer and Eve, and that was the start of it. You know, we didn't start with all our MA students, we didn't start with all of our Shetland collaborators. We started as a team of sort of 4 or 5, and we're able to bring a load of people along with us, and that's quite a long list, really. Local filmmakers as well, local actors, set design and build, costume, locations, and again, in the research phase, but also some of the rehearsal phase of the film, folklore and dialect experts as well. And yeah, I do think, you know, despite the fact we've set it on a fictional island, I've actually been emailed just in the last week about someone who's producing a documentary up in Shetland, asking for some insight and some support if I can offer it. So I think, you know, pushing Shetland as a place that can be so much more and has so much more to offer, really, than the BBC series gives it justice for, even though the BBC series is a worldwide phenomenon, so we shouldn't really, we don't want to sort of do that down completely. But I do think as a production, it just could do a lot more locally. I wonder why that hasn't been at their forefront, apart from the obvious, it's easier to shoot in a studio in Glasgow than get everyone on the ferry or the plane over to the Shetland Islands, and that does make some sense. Good. Okay, so those are the two film projects and my summary of them. I guess just a few concluding thoughts from me, really. As I just mentioned, I think that feature film projects, obviously, as academics producing films, we have to ensure, I believe, that we are speaking to the institution about what it is we're doing. And I think that's really complicated in so many ways. And every institution will be different, and the politics of it will also be different. But ultimately, these are huge from, I guess, promotional tools for whatever the university needs to say about itself and about who we are within that wider complex. I mean, I've got education down here, but really that page that I just brought up with George's story on it is sort of student recruitment. Come here, look at the experience that some of our students have had. But also education, I think, in terms of saying, well, hold on, look at the experience that we're able to give. But of course, again, depending on the institution, these are outputs. They can go in ref, they can be written about, they will be written about, and there's lots of things that can be articulated there. And there's a big question mark by this for me, because I'm not sure it would ever function properly. But I do think feature films as a commercial, as an element of commercialization in universities could work. I also think that would involve universities putting in a lot more money. So I don't think it'll ever work. But that's it could. You can see a spin-out company. You can see that it would function potentially. But also the co-production model that we've been able to use on these two projects has meant there is a variety of sources of income and stakeholders. Whereas I just don't know, if I said to anyone at the university, give us 200K, we want to go make a film in the Shetlands, that anyone's going to go, that's a great idea, thanks so much, here's your 200K, So yeah, I think commercialization's there with a question mark. I'm not sure that is necessarily it. And some provocations I think I'm going to end on. I don't have answers to these. Hopefully many of you are picking up on the fact that both of these projects are in train, and so I'm sort of talking to you about them, reflecting on the fact they got made, which I think is pretty incredible given the context and given the climate that we're in. But then that's made me think, well, hold on a minute, does this mean that universities are well placed, and I think that they are, to step in where our mainstream film and television funding bodies and supporters in the UK really aren't doing a great job, I don't think, of supporting so-called, really problematic term, independent work. So where are we getting that? Because I think the writers and actors strike of a few years ago demonstrated that we really are a proxy for American work. That's what's happening in the UK at the moment, is and we're very good at it. So, there's lots to celebrate. But it turns out when they have issues, we have issues. And, I think, I can't remember what the stat is, but certainly within the year, it was 60-something% of freelancers, according to Beck2, was still out of work, right? So we still have these big problems. And again, universities aren't positioned, unfortunately, to just step in and fill the gap completely and say, yeah, we'll pay you to work on a feature film, but they can certainly do some of it. And I think that's where, again, the co-production and bringing in other stakeholders, I think, is quite important. So yeah, I think I've got 4 sort of provocations that I think, are food for thought and are reflections on, I think, the process that I've been through making these films as an academic, as a producer. So I think the top one is universities need to sort of stop apologizing for being different and instead say, no, we are different and we do make films differently. We didn't make the new making of The Wicker Man that might have sold much more easily and been a Studio Canal sort of DVD extra. We actually did do some DVD extras for them, but you know, we didn't do that full feature film. We did a much more personal thing that I think was facilitated by the fact we were able to have a degree of independence around that. And Shetland wasn't marching up there and saying, yes, I'd like to build a Viking themed theme park. Thanks so much. You know, have you got 500 million? You know, it wasn't that at all. I mean, it was immediately sort of, oh shit, there's some stuff we've got wrong. There are some things that we've sketched in this treatment that aren't either correct or aren't, you know, subtle enough. And there's so much more that we have to learn. And maybe we can come together and collaborate and learn these things in making this film. Again, I hope we've made an enjoyable film out of that too. You know, but certainly there's so much to speak about. Research impact might mean creating spaces for films that are, I've used the term genuinely investigative here, but rather than well researched, right? So, you know, we can do films that are well researched. Many of us have. Many of us get involved in films separately as researchers. But actually, what if our impact is creating that space that gets different types of work made, or even allows work to get produced that might not otherwise get made? That's actually my final point. And that then isn't about the content of the films per se, even though I believe that what both films have in them is a result of their unique kind of production methods and methodologies. But, you know, is our universities able to claim that space and say, yeah, actually, we see all of you as hybrid academic producers, filmmakers, artists. We see that, we value that, and we think we can support it. You know, not entirely. Again, it's not what I'm saying here. Universities aren't going. I don't think universities are going to come to the table. Certainly not right now, because no one's flush with cash. They're not going to do the whole thing, but I do think they can be part of it. Our job is partly to articulate how they fit into that puzzle. And indeed, that point there, 3, speaks to that, I think. What if the hybrid funding model isn't really a compromise, but might be more of an honest representation of how cultural products get made? I am struck by, actually, every time we talk about impact, Eric's thing is still in my head. You know, you've made a film, so what? But actually, when you look at types of impact as defined by UKRI, cultural production is one of them. Making something is considered a type of impact. And indeed, particular film is mentioned as a specific output. So yes, we need to talk about it in wider terms. Yes, we need to think about articulating change if we're going down that route. But actually, I think we should also take stock and go, well, actually, hold on, we made it. You know, when actually there were so many hurdles to actually getting these things done, we were able to get them over the line and start getting them out to audiences. Not that the Shetland film has been picked up by a festival yet, so I don't know when that's going to be seen by anyone, but nevertheless, there we go. I nearly did talk for an hour, didn't I? I genuinely didn't think I'd manage that. Great, thank you so much. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and sip some water.
Thank you so much, Chris. It was absolutely fascinating. I cannot tell you how much I enjoyed your talk for so many reasons. There are already some questions in the chat, but I also have plenty. So I'm gonna take the, my privileged position. I'm gonna use my privileged position of a person who chairs that meeting to ask you the first question, if that's okay. But first of all, I just wanted to acknowledge once again how refreshing it is to listen to you talk from a perspective of someone who doesn't find it so easy to keep making films while being part of, the academic machine. So you're very inspiring in your talk, and it's so lovely to see how you're finding a way to be so prolific in with your filmmaking. So that's really great. And it was also great for you to start your talk from acknowledging great work that people like Neil and Eric do. And for those of you who haven't watched their talks, I highly encourage you to catch up with the past conversations from the seminar. Really, really good talks by both of these guys. So I would like to ask, the first question I would like to ask you would be, by coming back to your first provocation, really. I really like it, the idea of the university embracing or kind of just accepting that they're, a different model than a commercial one. Obviously it doesn't happen very often, so your list of acknowledging places like Falmouth and what Eric did, and two other examples, including what happened at my university, this is not a very long list. So what do you think is missing for the rest of the universities to pick up on this game and just join and be able to kind of do the same? What do you think is the missing ingredient?
Firstly, I worry that one of the things that's missing is how I think actually a lot more work is going on and a lot more co-production is going on, but I don't know how it's being articulated or where it's being articulated. I know University of Westminster colleagues who've done documentaries. I know University of Sussex colleagues who've done them. So again, part of it might be around articulation and capturing the work that's going on. And it may well be that there's more work to be done in saying, both to institutions as well as to the public, as well as to peers. Do you have any idea how many people are actually making films in universities? Because I think the number would be a lot higher. Other than that, I think one of the biggest problems in institutions are moments where they're looking at your subject area and moments where they're not. And I happen to be at Birmingham at a moment where our college's strategy is moving towards educating the creative industries. So they're looking for the sort of thing that I have been able to turn up and do. At my previous institution, I don't think we were looked at for all the wrong reasons, so they weren't really looking at us and going, how can we support you in your creative endeavors and ideas and really research, because this absolutely is part of our research. And again, one of the reasons I like your seminar series is because it's a space for people to articulate and defend is also possibly the wrong term, but to say, no, this is our research work and it's really valuable. So again, are we able to sort of put together case studies that speak to universities? Is every colleague in every university always going to struggle at the point at which it's is anyone looking at your area? Is anyone investing in your area at the moment? And that, I think, is probably the big problem. It's not partly, it's a big national, even international discussion to try and tease out where this work is going on and why it's valuable. Secondly, though, I think it's always going to come down to local negotiations, and I don't know that any one of us on this call can predict exactly what the old university management crystal ball. I mean, it's really tough, isn't it? Like I say, I have landed here just at a particular moment. I hope that moment lasts, and I hope we build something that is able to be a bit bigger. But that comes with challenges too. I mean, I'm not considered a researcher, and my films are absolutely not outputs, which to some of you on this call will sound absurd, and it sounds absurd.
It does, and if that's okay, that's gonna lead me to the next question before I take the questions from the chat, because I think it's such a interesting comment you just made, because of course it is, and you've mentioned very briefly, amongst all the other accolades you received for your film, the BAFTA Practice as Research award you received for your film. And of course, there's lots of interesting stuff over there, and there's a huge value in that part of it. Apart from, on top of, the educational and impact and all the other things you talked about at length with your talk. So would you mind telling us a little bit how you as a filmmaker see the kind of sitting across all this requirements, because that's what they are. So obviously we're talking, and I'm going to ask you about the kind of the commercial value of your film and distribution in a second, but obviously the idea of research is there, and the fact that you're being awarded for that is also quite significant. But yet I actually find it quite interesting. It was a very minor part of your talk. You kind of very briefly mentioned that, and this is where it was. So I was just wondering,
I think I've downplayed it because I'm in an environment where I'm being told to downplay that bit. Of course it's research. Any one of us, we all know that because we all do this, and this is how we articulate a lot of our research, not just in the ideas that find their way into the films, but in the way we make the films, and so it's so obvious. But actually, if you're in an environment where you're just told that's not the bit, if anything, if there's any value here, it's in impact and engagement, then our job, then I suppose I've started pivoting towards that and absorbing the narrative of what's going on around me. But I must be honest, I'm quite a pragmatic producer. And so actually, when I say your film can be any of these things, what I mean is put it in whatever terms get you what you need from the institution. So if the university really wants to demonstrate how well they are educating their students, then you talk up the educational aspects of your film. Yeah. If they are really looking for that impact case study, then you talk about your impact and engagement. Whatever, because I believe genuinely most film projects produced in or with universities absolutely can be articulated across almost all four of those lines that I mentioned in the talk. And I'm very shameless in I will just say, okay, you need me to say that? Okay, that's fine. Well, I can talk about that bit of the film. Yeah, sorry, I don't know if that answers it. And it also sounds really, maybe a bit shitty, but I don't think it is. I think, there is a survival bit of this where it's
I completely understand.
It's not that I would downplay any of those aspects, because I genuinely believe that all these films are doing most of these things at any given time, but that isn't quite how our professional lives as academics are viewed. Even if it's something as mundane is the wrong term, but even something as mundane as a sort of what do you do every year, like your annual progress review, or your Birmingham, it's a points-based promotion system, so you have to think about where you score points. Again, I'm not here to debate that. I'm just saying that under that system we have education, we have research, and we have impact and engagement. So actually you need to sit there and go, all right, how can I articulate the thing that I've done that I know is all of these things? But how can I position it so that it strategically works at a particular time?
I see what you're saying.
I don't hugely like myself for saying any of this, but I do think if you want to ask me how these things have occurred, it's partly because I've made choices at certain points to articulate things a certain way.
Absolutely. And it makes a lot of sense. And, at the same time, I really agree with you that these things are very difficult to separate. And, when you say impact, for me, impact is research. You cannot have impact without research. It just seems like, looking at a really nicely cooked meal and just kind of separating ingredients for the sake of telling, where you get them from.
Yes.
So it's a very artificial exercise, but I completely understand, why you're saying what you're saying, and then it's all about kind of positioning what we do in relation to the expectations we have. And it's gonna link me to my question about commercialization of a work like yours. But there's so many questions in the chat already, so I will move on to the questions from the chat first, if that's okay with you, and then I'm gonna open it to the public and ask my questions towards the end. So Kenneth Grant asks, there's a Scottish film out just now called I Swear. This was made by a former student of the Uni of West of Scotland. The uni invested in film quite substantially. The film has gone into profit. Maybe a new model worth investigating? So it's more a kind of a comment. I don't know if you want to add something.
No, as I don't know of it, Kenneth, then no, I have nothing much to add apart from how fantastic is that. I'm looking up the film right now on my other screen. So how excellent. I'm very pleased to hear that.
Yeah. So I don't know, Kenneth, if you would like to unmute yourself and maybe tell us a little bit about, how it was distributed and how, in which way the film has gone into profit, because that's quite an interesting one. So I don't know if you'd like to join the conversation. Don't worry if not.
Hi.
Hi,
Hi.
hello there. Hi, Chris. Thank you so much for your talk. It was really brilliant. Thank you so much. I don't know much about the film. I just read this, that it was a former student who had made it. I think it's Studio Canal have distributed it, and so it's in the mainstream cinemas. But one of the things that it did say was that the university had invested in the production of it quite substantially.
Yeah.
Which is it was just interesting because it's so kind of odd that would happen. So it may well be a model worth, you know, finding out what they were, how they did it, and what they were up to.
Yeah, thank you so much for pointing to that. I'm just looking it up now, and I think I'm hugely curious about how that's gone. So thank you. Any new models? We need them all, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And especially now, because we know there's so many universities who are kind of struggling with their finances at the moment. So that's an interesting example as well to kind of look at. Susie Miller says, what could universities provide in kind to support filmmakers?
We've just launched a scheme here at Birmingham to support alumni who have, so let's say they do our masters and then they actually have a documentary project that they think they can go on. Documentary is more our specialism here, by the way, which is why I've said that. And I think, again, the apparatus for sort of teaching fiction filmmaking is a slightly different thing. We do some of that here, but we don't do a lot of it. So if one of our master's students says, I've got this documentary idea, then they can come back and we will offer them camera and sound and lighting kit, whatever they need, and we would offer them use of our editing facilities, again, at a time where they're not in huge demand by current students. We've also recently made that offer to some independent shorts that are being made and kind of co-funded by a sort of grassroots filmmaking initiative here in Birmingham called Real Brum. So that's a really kind of quite a small well, no, actually, sorry, it's not a small network at all. It's an absolutely massive network, but they are a very a sort of small organization run by 3 really committed people. And they managed to give some money from the comedian Joe Lycett to a film. And I said to them, well, does that money, is that supposed to include sort of kit hire and post-production stuff? And they said, yes. And I said, well, that's absurd. It's only £5,000. I'll tell you what, why don't, we'll talk to my colleagues here and make sure that I'm not promising things we can't deliver, but I'm pretty sure we could put together a kit and we could give you access to one of our edit suites, again with the caveat we've got to avoid busy times of year for our own students. So yes, that's what I think universities in the first instance can offer. There's obviously expertise here, but as many colleagues on the call will be aware, we also tend to be a bit run ragged in universities. So how much any academic would be able to offer up their time and insight, I don't know, even though I think that would be fantastic if we were all in a position to do that. But I think there's students who, again, I'm really wary, and even on our own films, I've been a bit wary or as careful as I can around trying to pay people properly. But obviously there is a sort of acknowledgement that, if you've got a film to make and you want a bit of help and our students are here and they're kind of up for it and it's at that developmental stage, and no one feels they're being ripped off, then we have keen students as well who I think would like to learn and offer their support. Not that we would make them do that, and we certainly wouldn't make them do it for free. And again, as a filmmaker, you might have a bit of cash. If you've got a bit of cash for someone, at least you're not hiring someone completely random. You're at least grabbing someone who's studying film and has demonstrated at least a commitment to that. So those would be a few of my thoughts on what universities can do. Obviously, the funding thing is complex because that really needs to have an academic, depending on the type of money, I suppose, but it needs an academic something and an academic attached, I believe, to a project really, before we could definitely say, yes, I could look at money for something. But yeah, sorry, those are my broad brushstrokes for the ways I think universities can support, in-kind support to filmmakers.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I wanted to add some comments, but I think the next question links to that again, so I'm just going to read it. So, Rich Matthews is asking, what is the primary value of university funding filmmaking, the art? The research value, especially if documentary, the training, for example, vocational, is it responsible to prime people for a production model that might be struggling? Allowing to streaming platforms might be more realistic. And then he continues, could it be combined with focus on community well-being by taking up to the mantle of community film that has all but disappeared?
Yeah, thanks, Rich. I think I love your second comment around community film, which I completely agree has all but disappeared. And I'm minded of the Channel 4 BFI 1980s workshops that happened in many, mostly regional cities. So Birmingham was one, and Sheffield was one. And I wonder if universities are meant to be more like that. And of course, I am contradicting myself because the two films that I've just spoken about are not positioned like that at all. But then I think you also have to be mindful of what the project is that you have in front of you. Yeah. So, the Wicker Man doc, and, to an extent, I feel like our Shetland film was doing a lot of community work by working with local people. And I will stand by that. But that's not here in Birmingham, and the university's in Birmingham. So, of course, yes, I think we should be the civic university who is, again, helping to get work made that isn't getting made. And yeah, the training and the vocational, I think, is really tricky, because my view on it at the moment, and actually it's been my view for some time, is that working in the film and television industries and making films are not necessarily the same thing. Sometimes those things align. And that would be many of our experiences, I think, as people with that would be many of our experiences. And that's kind of what I want to prime students for, I think. We'll bring you on this film this time. This is the model that worked for this film at this moment. Can I guarantee that the same thing will work for you, for your film in 6 months' time, and you'll get some money? No, I can't really do that. Does that mean that we align to streaming platforms? At my last institution, there was some management paper that just turned up that said, why aren't we partnered with Netflix? And I was like, okay, cool, but what on earth do you mean by that? From the theatre guy, what does that mean? And I suppose that I'm left thinking the same thing. I don't know what it means to align to a streaming platform. I understand that are Netflix, Amazon, Disney going to be from the theatre guy? What does that mean? And I suppose that I'm left thinking the same thing. I don't know what it means to align to a streaming platform. I understand that are Netflix, Amazon, Disney going to be interested in co-productions with universities? I can't really see it. They might be. I don't know what that would look like. Now, it might look like something more local. It might look like Channel 4. It might look like iPlayer. It might look like ITV. God help us all, it might be Channel 5. But, it just, I don't know. I hear what you're saying about the changing of a model, right? Which is, of course, I'm talking about traditional distribution things. Like, I can't believe Children of the Wicker Man is going to end up on a Blu-ray. That's absurd to me. But of course, it isn't to you, Rich, who has a fabulous Blu-ray library. So, like, I don't know. Yeah, quite. I guess I don't know, and none of us know really what the models are, and that's what makes educating this so damn challenging. I don't know what the future looks like. No one does. Remember during COVID, when everyone got really excited about virtual production? We have these technological waves and things come in, and then they sort of die down again. And I don't know, any more than I would like to say, definitely go and make your independent film because you'll end up with a Blu-ray. I don't think that's true. But similarly, I wouldn't say definitely make a film in this style because it will definitely get picked up by Netflix, because I don't know quite what the dynamics of any of that is.
Yeah, and it changes quite a lot. And I think it's a good moment. I'm going to make sure I come back to all the questions in the chat, but I think it is a good moment to talk about distribution. I told you at the beginning, and I told everyone, I'm a big fan of your film, and I would love to see it in cinemas. And I don't quite understand why I can't when there's so many things I don't want to see that are in cinemas, if you want, if you know what I mean. So it's an interesting thing. And, like I worked for my PhD 100 years ago, I worked with the idea of indigenous filmmaking, and it was really interesting for me to see how, many indigenous communities make what you would call more commercial films, but yet they're just being labeled, oh, this is indigenous filmmaking. It's just going to go to a separate box where people just don't want to see it because it's indigenous, even though it will be a proper feature film about something completely, universal, if you like. And I worry that one of the problems we might have with films produced at the, in the university context might be this idea, well, they're research films. Because we kind of have to respond to this idea of what research we apply to, all kind of research we kind of produce as part of that project. Do you think that's a problem? Because I think it's a wonderful thing to have some research applied to your filmmaking. But do you think it's a problem when it comes to distribution?
Who ultimately, and I'm just seeing in the comments here that Rich has clarified he was talking about YouTube, which of course I didn't mention when I was thinking about streaming services. So actually, okay, so we could think a bit more about YouTube in this context. But my question is always audience. Who are you trying to speak? Who is this film for, and how do you get that film to those people? And I think in that context, it's perfectly legitimate to say, we made a community-centered film, and its designs were not international, its designs were local, and it was designed to be shown to communities that were local. It was never designed to be online. It was never designed to be sent anywhere necessarily or do a festival run. That is a completely legitimate type of filmmaking, and one that I think universities are remarkably well primed to support and be a part of. However, there is, of course, the higher advocacy work and the bigger projects, like I think the two that I've done and many of the others that I mentioned in the talk as well, where we are defaulting to very traditional methods of distribution, which is bizarre when you think about it, because they've been made in a radical way. Why aren't we thinking about distributing them in a radical way? And maybe that is one of the tensions of work that is produced outside of formal industry cultures and systems that we don't really know. We still don't know how to get that out to an audience without depending on the very traditional thing, which again isn't about making money. It just isn't, although partly it is with our Shetland film for sure, because we have investors, right? So I'm accountable, yes, to produce outputs and to speak internally to the institution about what that film meant for our students, about what that film means in research terms and articles. But I actually have people who've put in over £100,000 and are expecting at least their money back, if not a mild return on investment. That, again, it got the film made, but is that then almost a contradiction in terms? I'm not sure I have an answer for that.
And I'm going to go back to what I said at the beginning of my question. I really also feel that, there's a huge value in films like yours. And it's frustrating for me personally that it's just so difficult to, to see, which is maybe something we as a community of, filmmakers, academics should think about. Like, what is this, what do we need to do to make it a little bit easier? What is this more alternative, rebellious way of making it more commercial, accessible, and just for us to really appreciate what we do, because not everyone will be able to go to the festivals where you send your films, and it's obviously very limited in terms of our access to to physically go to places. And yet I think it's very frustrating because it really should be seen by people because it's a great film, as simple as that, really. And and so are many other films created in kind of in this kind of context. And it's quite interesting also when you were talking about, signing a deal with the US, and as you rightly say, well, your film particularly, and I'm talking about the Children of the Wicker Man, is a film which should be seen in a UK context for obvious reasons. You kind of think about some kind of,
Well,
film
it's going to cinemas in America. I mean, that's fine.
It's bonkers, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's showing in
Uh,
Croydon on Friday, if I didn't mention. It's showing
yes.
in Croydon. So,
Yes.
come and join us at the David Lee. It's a fantastic indie cinema. So
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I wish I could join. I'm going to be teaching all day on Friday, but yes, for anyone else here in a chat. So we do have quite a few questions, and we have about 10 minutes left. So I'm just going to continue with the questions from the chat, if that's okay. So we have again a question from Kenneth Grant. He says, "I worry about the protection the university would give the researcher or filmmaker, in which the research is of a sensitive nature, such as around nuclear weapons establishment, which might stray into controversial territory, possibly breaking military bylaws, for example." And then he says, "Chris, what about distribution? That is such an important factor," and we kind of talked about it right now, "in a destination of the content, almost imperative if one is making a film. The research is not finished until the audience has have received it." So we can almost have like two comments.
Yeah, two questions. Thanks again, Kenneth. The protections thing is really tricky. My instinct is, yes, I agree with you. I don't know how much an institution would protect any of us, actually, for almost anything, let alone a documentary that strays into controversial territory, though I would submit that we absolutely are the people who should be making those films.
Yeah, I agree.
Because of course we can put it in a research context. Of course we can deal with our friends on the ethics committee, and we can we can put a framework around it. Of course we can put an appropriate framework around it. But when a film causes controversy, as historically we know some have, a lot of the big people who were involved in those things tend to fall silent and sort of disappear. And I worry that a university has the potential to do that. And I'm aware that I'm sort of othering the institution as this amorphous thing, which is a bit of a weird thing too, because of course I work here and I'm a part of the institution. Of course I am, but I think that, we there are risks there where I would want to think personally very carefully about the extent to which I thought I could do that, despite the fact that I completely agree that we should be able to tackle those really difficult topics and we should feel supported and protected.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I agree. I agree. And distribution, again, we've already discussed it. Richard's question was really pertinent on that as well. Agatha, your follow-up. My feeling is, that we've gone and made films in a really different way, and with distribution, we're doing the American film market, and it's all very traditional and slow and costly, actually. And so I guess one of my takeaways from this talk actually is that isn't terribly sustainable. And if we are going to do this properly as a collective group of people, then we probably need to work out an alternative way to get some of these films distributed. And not that I'm flush with time, but I'm definitely around and up for the discussion.
I have some ideas boiling in my head,
Right,
which we can discuss after this. So I'm just going to ask a couple of remaining questions from the chat. So David Murphy says, "To pick up on a question above, I was wondering if there has been any tensions or anxieties regarding the costs associated with feature film distribution, again, distribution question, as opposed to production, when compared to other practice-based research projects."
The Children of the Wicker Man got AHRC impact acceleration money to help it go to festivals, and there wasn't much of an argument about that, aside from why did I pay for WeTransfer Pro, which of course I said, well, I have to transfer large files internationally, so it sort of makes sense. But it turned out I hadn't really put that in the budget, so it's my fault. But it's always my fault. But So actually there wasn't much of a tension around that. I think there is an acknowledgement, or there should be an acknowledgement that actually, you know, if the film doesn't get seen by anyone, then your ability to evidence any impact or engagement, your ability is completely compromised.
Yeah.
So my experience on that particular project is no, there wasn't actually much of a fight over the logic was supported that we must get this film out there. I can, of course, see arguments that would turn up, you know, to say, well, we already paid for the film. We don't want to pay to sort of get it out there. So yeah, I can see your point. That wasn't, luckily for the documentary, our experience on that and that particular set of funding. Again, back to my notion that there are sort of different ways we can articulate our projects. That I believe that was a particular articulation of, if you want impact and engagement demonstrated, then we should pay to get it out to festivals around the world.
It honestly feels like there's some work for us as a community to be done in relation to that. Like these conversations make it quite clear. So a couple of last questions here. So David is asking again, like, what is the difficult question? If YouTube is the destination platform, to what extent it is a film and not just content? Interesting question.
Yeah, David, I think that's a separate talk, isn't it? What's content? I think. No, I think a lot of filmmakers put films on YouTube and we call them films, whether they're shorts, whether they're features, whether they're generating money from that from them or not, or charging us to watch them or not, or getting ad revenue. I think it is a hosting platform. My experience of sort of academic filmmaking tends to be that we all gravitate towards Vimeo as a platform to host things on. But if we were talking about alternative distribution and other ways of doing things, then YouTube, which is a more monetized platform, might genuinely be the way to go. My feeling about that is that it's just such a big place with so much content. There you go. So how does your film, your feature film, your short film, how does it stand in and out and amongst a sea of content? I don't have an answer to that.
So in that case, I think the distribution would really need to link to a specific type of marketing you apply to it. Otherwise, it just gets lost. It's a very good point, Chris. And again, I feel so sad that we almost ran out of time because the discussion is so fascinating. But I'm just going to read the last kind of 2 questions, if that's okay, and hopefully there will be a way to continue this conversation at some point outside of this seminar. So Rich is kind of commenting to David's question, and is that a real distinction right now in terms of film and content, which I think is a clever question. I don't know if you want to add something to that.
No, I think content is a term that is just being thrown around, and I don't really know that either people working purely in the film and television industries or the wider digital media industries, or us as academics, have quite wrapped our head around what on earth we mean when we say content. One distinction that I would make that I think is awfully clumsy is between things that are designed to be from the outset a film, short or feature. I think is different to content. I know that the streamers would disagree with me, but that I think there is a distinction that one can make. I'm not sure that I either am making the correct one or am the person qualified to make that distinction. But, you know, certainly in the spirit of further discussions, that would be another one to have.
Yeah, and I also want to link it back to what I said before. Like I personally see a bit of a problem in terms of this kind of labels we put on different types of filmmaking, and for lack of a better term, just to call something an academic filmmaking, and the kind of the luggage it holds, it kind of applies to it, and the implications of that are not always the most positive. So I think, again, this is for another discussion, which I think we should probably have at some point. So the final question here, so again from David, from a distribution engagement perspective, arguably, but not necessarily from a production perspective, engagement is a metric that is much easier to track on platforms like YouTube, for example, harder in alternative form distribution venues like festivals and indie cinemas, which are really important still, for sure.
Yeah, much harder. I mean, you're not going to have, it's possible that festivals have tracked audience attendance at your events. And I know that traditional ways of quantifying impact and engagement do rest on, well, I had 20 people at my research seminar, and we really do want to go down that route. Given the breadth and the places that the film went, the Children of the Wicker Man documentary went, given that I was able to attend, I think 3 of them, maybe 4, I haven't got a clue. I mean, we might have played to a room full of 100. We might have played, as we did when I was there, to a room full of 3. I mean, it just doesn't. So actually, I was being slightly sarcastic about 3, but it actually, I think it's about what I want to claim really is that the festival itself, and the fact that it played in South Africa and it played in Brazil, and it's clearly had this sort of wide appeal, seems like enough to me to say that it was interesting. What I want to know in terms of significance, not reach, is why it was programmed in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's my, if they ever say to me, Chris, you're going to be an impact case study, and the odds on that, by the way, very slim. But if they did, then that would be my way of starting to articulate why the film mattered and why it mattered to a select community, which is fantastic film festivals that worship cult films like The Wicker Man. So I wouldn't necessarily, but yes, sorry, I'm talking around your point, David. Your point is taken that actually, if we have it online on a streaming something, we're going to get numbers. If we do what I've done and send it around the world to a load of indie festivals that happen sort of in rooms above pubs, we're not going to have it. Actually, sorry, there was a room above a pub, and I did go, and that was about 5 people. Yeah, I remember that. Anyway, so yes, you're right. We're not gonna quantify that, and we're not going to be able to count. So we're going to have to think about other ways to justify or reverse justify, I suppose, our work in that context.
Yeah, I find it quite difficult to actually talk in these terms. I have to say that we have to talk about numbers, but again, this is another thing about us justifying things.
I was part of a really positive. I was part of a very positive meeting recently with our impact lead for our college here, who reminded the room that we do not do research just for ref, and we do not do impact. We do not do impact and engagement just for.
Absolutely.
And there was a line about the fact that the impact case studies for ref have a very specific language about them, and a very specific, and that isn't actually why we do our work. So again, going back to Rich's broader question in the chat earlier about what the value of these films and filmmaking within academia is, great. So let's feel released from the formalities of it. Not all of us are going to be, but let's feel a bit released from that and go, okay, well, why does this really matter?
Absolutely.
And ask those questions. Sorry, I could talk all day, and I know we're over, aren't we?
No, we're over. I'm so sorry to keep everyone waiting. So I'm just gonna read the last few comments and we're done. So Nick is saying impact money can help with alternative distribution, and I think maybe that's something we could all look into. And then David concludes with a couple of comments. Good to hear that all those costs are being covered. It's a huge problem with games. Platforms have really taken the wind out of the sails of indie games production, for example. It's nice to hear that there are folks still making that distinction. Yeah, amazing. I mean, I have to say this is really, really amazing conversations, and I really wish we had more time. We basically ran out of time, so sorry to keep everyone a few minutes longer than we were expected. But Chris, thank you so much. I think it's a spectacular opening of the 5th season of Rebellious Research Seminar. Amazing film once again. Congratulations. Could you remind everyone about Friday screening once again? Do you want to do it?
Oh, I've said it about 10 times, but it is screening, I think, at 7 o'clock at the David Lean Cinema in Croydon. There may be some tickets left, I don't know, but also I've got a few set aside, so just email me, really. So do come along. And the book was published last week from History Press, Children of the Wicker Man. So there's so much there in the book that couldn't go in the film for various reasons. So do have a look at that as well. And I will keep this lovely community posted on what happens with our fabulous Shetland film as that moves.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I couldn't recommend your film more, so I hope you can all see it in one way or another. Thank you so much. And I'm going to make sure this amazing talk is available online probably by the end of today. So thank you so much, Chris. It was genuinely a pleasure. Best luck with the next film. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.